Welcome to Behind the Sims. At SaberSim, we're a team of professional gamblers, data scientists, and sports nerds building the best DFS optimizer and sports betting model on the market. This podcast is a behind-the-scenes look at how we do it. Every episode is an unedited recording of our team's actual conversations as we research, analyze, and iterate our way to answering the tough questions in DFS and sports betting. Whether we're answering questions like what's the best way to build your bankroll, analyzing different ways to diversify, or even building new models, we're going to share it all right here, and we aren't holding anything back. If you're ready to go deep into what it really takes to win, then this is a podcast for you.
In this episode, the second episode in our contest simulation series, Andy, Matt, and Elijah continue the work to improve our contest simulation framework and discuss the ongoing efforts to backtest and optimize our sliders. Our primary goal here is to figure out what the optimal sliders are to use for a given contest, but we also want to research the cost of using sliders that are not the defaults for a particular contest. The end goal of this project is to give better, data-driven recommendations about what settings should be used to build lineups on SaberSim. I hope you enjoy.
So I guess before we even talk about the findings, Matt, can you talk a little bit about there's a few levels that we want to do to improve the framework. One is just have it be fully scalable in the cloud so that we can just kick off if we want to evaluate 10 different slates. We can do that at once rather than one slate, then the next, then the next. But before that, there's some other steps we want to get in. So can you just kind of catch me up on where that's at right now?
Yeah, sure. So where we left off last time was, so there are kind of two parts of this. So one was refactoring how the contest sim was set up. Initially, essentially, we would grab a bunch of contests, and then we would go for each contest, we would run a bunch of builds, analyze them against the contest and store the results. And then we'd go to the next contest and we'd do the same thing. But that was obviously very inefficient because we ended up running kind of a bunch of builds for two contests or multiple contests in the same slate. And so we refactored that a little bit to we'll pick a slate first, and essentially and then we kick off all these builds for all these different setting combinations, and then we'll pull in all of the contests that we have for that slate and then analyze those builds that we ran against all of those contests. And so that's just a more efficient way and a more logical way of going through this process. Then the other part of it was setting it up so that we could run all the stuff in the cloud, which would allow us to use a bunch of different machine VMs instances to run all these different contests or slates at once. So rather than having to just go one by one and analyze all the contests, we can just kick off as many contests and or slates at a time as we want. So we could kick off if we wanted 10,
so I guess
20.
without getting into as much of what it would do, practically speaking, the part that you've tackled so far is changing the order of operations to get it a bit more efficient. But then one of the other issues we ran into, it wasn't on the call, but in Slack, of just okay, all right, let's set up 24 hours worth of these just to run in a row. But there were some timeout issues and just other things where the process kind of broke. So you've been working on just setting up better logic where if things aren't working correctly, it doesn't bring it all down. But
yeah, so where we're at now
that's in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, so I set up some better sort of just retry logic because there'll be if we have connection issues, Wi-Fi goes out or something like that, we don't want it to just break the whole script. And so we set up some better retry logic for that so that one network error won't just crash the whole sim. And then what I'm gonna do later this week or tomorrow probably is set it up so that we're storing the results as it's running. So after each contest or after each build is analyzed in each contest, we'll store the results and make sure that we're saving those as we go along so that we don't lose that work if there's some weird edge case that fails. So yeah, that's part of it is that retry logic, just to make sure that we're not wasting our time with when there's errors. And then, yeah, we actually, in terms of the cloud infrastructure, we have made good progress there. And that's just sort of in the, I think, testing phase. Yuri set up.
Oh, Yuri's working on it?
Yeah, he opened a pull request earlier
Awesome.
today on that. So I haven't connected with him on, I think I'll connect with him on just like kind of what he set up. But yeah, I think that should be pretty close to ready. And so I think I'm not sure how we'll sort of split up those, like whether it's going to be each instance. Because basically how we're going to run this is like there's the variables that go into it are like the slate. I guess it's really the contest and the build that's being analyzed, but like each contest is sort of in a slate too. And so we could sort of like run, say, if we had 10 VMs, we could run just like a slate on each one. And so then each of those slates would have like.
Are we going with it? Is it going to be a defined number of VMs that aren't necessarily always on, but like we're not managing it as closely? Or do you know if there's much more technical overhead to have it just be on demand?
I don't think so, because the way that we have it set up for like our sims is that like they'll spin up more instances as we need them. And so if like we kick off 15 sims at once, like for all the games of tonight's MLB slate, like we'll make sure it'll spin up enough instances to run those sims. And so we could do the same thing here where it's just auto scales based on how many, contest sims we want to run. And so we could kick off, one process for every contest, and we might have hundreds of contests because we have a bunch of different slates and contests for each one. And then like the question is whether we want to do a different process for each build for each contest, or we want to just say like, okay, like this is the list of all the builds that we want to analyze. Each VM will just go through and analyze all the builds for this contest. I think it doesn't.
How long do you think that would take to analyze all the builds for one contest?
It's Elijah. Like how I know you said that it's
not even for like an entire slate, but what Elijah said, I thought it'd be like a couple hours for a full slate.
So it depends on the size of the contest.
Right. Yeah.
So like a big contest is maybe 30 minutes, like max from what I'm seeing, and smaller contests can be like 3 minutes. So I'd say
for all the builds,
Yeah.
Let's just do it for all the builds.
Yeah. So I would say I'm doing it for I would say 80% of all the possible builds or something like that. So like I would say that will probably hold.
Because we want it to be fast, but if it takes an hour, even that's not that big of a deal to run like a shit ton of these.
Because we can run a bunch of them at once. Exactly. So
right, we can run all of them at like all of the different things that we're testing at once. But like I don't care if that test takes an hour. We just don't want it to be each one takes an hour and there's 100 to go through. So I would say, and I think having it be faster runs into like it might not actually be that. It would obviously be faster, but like with these instances, they're not going to spin up immediately, and like there's just other billing issues and other things. So I think just one contest per VM, and it does all of the builds on that VM before shutting down. Okay.
Yeah, so I think that we'll probably just need to do a little bit more work to make sure that setup is correct, but I think we can certainly by the end of the week, probably more like by tomorrow or Thursday, hopefully be able to set that up so that Elijah can start just like kicking them off, and then have a bunch of stuff to analyze end of the week, start of next week.
Okay, that'll be awesome then. Okay, because I think I had like a mini panic attack when I was like looking in Slack and just seeing kind of Elijah's train of thought on like different buckets for the contest and everything else, and it was great thinking, but it's just like it kind of got into the issue that we had mentioned before, where it's like when you're waiting for something to finish, you're going to find things to analyze. And it's I think you had some good ideas for how we could create different buckets of contests, but it's like I don't know if that's really a great use of time, but
Yeah.
that was all you could spend it on. So I get it. And so I'm glad
Right.
that, it's all coming together so we can just make sure we get the data so that Elijah can focus those efforts in a way that has more of a material impact.
Sure.
And I think, so I guess, shifting over to Elijah, I know you've got a couple slates. We can at least talk about like some early findings, but
Sure.
before then, were you able to search through to see if we have cache, satellites, multipliers?
I looked through. We definitely have those saved. I think it's possible that the two slates that I pulled had like really small amounts of them, so I just dropped them for this analysis because it messed up the sizes in each bucket. But we do save like the double up and the multipliers and stuff. So we have that, and it's pretty easy for me to like match that and pull them.
Okay.
So we definitely had those. Like I just checked our database, and we do.
Okay. Awesome.
We have like the entries too, not just the contest information.
I'm
Okay,
like
cool.
pretty sure like when I did like a join on the data that I was pulling from like your stuff, I was getting like
Okay.
I was getting stuff.
Cool.
But I just dropped them for this because like the buckets were way too small, so I just treated everything as a GPP for now. Just because,
Okay. And then were you able to run that analysis to figure, one of the things we talked about is just like in the app, when you tell us what contest you're playing and we adjust the sliders accordingly, there's basically like 24 combinations you can pick for GPPs.
Yeah.
And what we wanted to do is like, okay, like let's just use that as a starting point of buckets. We can see if there's better ones. We can see if some of these just like literally no contest ever fits in it.
Yeah.
And go from there. But what we wanted is just like see literally how many fall into each bucket. And so were you able to do that, Elijah?
Yes. Yeah. So that was like the first thing. That was my first step, my analysis. It was to see like, okay, how are these buckets actually filling out? Because then I could start to separate them out and start to see how they may behave differently. But obviously, if there's only like one contest in these two slates in a single bucket, then that's not like a true depiction of how we'd expect these to act. So by far, the most popular contest over the two slates was it was 20 max with 100 to 1,000 entrants, and there was like 13.
Okay.
There was 13.
I'm guessing
contests.
it's because there's like
the dime
solo
times.
shot. There's got to be some. The dime time I thought was bigger, but like maybe it's 1,000 or something like that. But yeah, there's going to be like some contests that when they fill, there's small enough stakes where DK is just like, all right, like put another one out and just like, keep doing it. But that's still
sense.
like interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was definitely, and just like for some context, I think the two dates that I used for the slates were like middle of May and middle of June. So like those are the 2 days where like those filled up, and they were both happened to be Saturdays randomly. So I don't know if that's like a special MLB contest on DraftKings where that's like a popular thing on Saturdays, but just some context there.
So that one thing I would make a note on is when we get, so this was the other part where it's like, we don't want to, just talking to viewers now, it's like one of the issues with like the running these sims being a manual process is like Elijah would set up all the parameters, kick it off, it'd take a few hours, then you set up the next one. But when it's that tedious and slow of a process, you're just not going to be able to be comprehensive in your analysis. And so you have to then make some trade-offs and saying, okay, well, like how many slates are enough? Like, okay, what days do we want to look at? And to me, there's a practical impact of having a scalable framework of just making it easier to run, kick off a bunch, but it also then makes it so that we don't have to make these trade-offs anymore. Obviously, we're not going to do this for like every single day of data that we have, because I think it's just, you're going to have diminishing returns. But Matt, I'm curious your thought. Like what I would say is at a bare minimum, I think we should do every day of the week individually, sample and like just randomly pick part of the season for that. And at least twice, but maybe 3 times. Like, I don't know. So like you'd have like 3 Mondays, 3 Tuesdays. But that's to me just like arbitrary, but seems like that should be enough to get like a good idea. Cause I mean, that would be 21 slates. I I think that's kind of a minimum, but I guess
Well, at
ultimately,
least
like,
because
one,
there'd be like
yeah,
the early slate and the night slate
true,
for
right.
Yeah.
baseball. Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like why stop there? Like when we set it up on GCE, like I feel
So
like
I guess like what cost, like, to get as specific as you can, how much will it cost to run each of these?
I mean the instances. So like Elijah said, each contest, like a really big contest, could be 30 minutes,
Yeah.
right? But like that's going to be the most with how we currently have it set up. Like that'll
Call
be
it 10
the
minutes, and we
longest.
have 80 contests, so 800 minutes of contests per
Yeah, I mean,
slate.
I can't remember the like pricing for VMs, but like I'm pretty sure it's gonna be pretty insignificant. Like I think it'll be worth doing this for longer, given like how much the VMs cost. I'm just kind of looking at um, real quick, like what our baseball uh, VMs are, but they're like you know VMs are so cheap these days. It's like 7 cents an hour. Um, it's like $50 a month to have it running 24/7 with like our MLB sims, which is like super cheap. Like we could do a much more powerful sim that would VM that would get them done faster for still like not that much. So I
Okay,
think
so
that it
so
would be worth,
call it
and like that's the
it's 7
cost because like
cents.
the data storage isn't anything, and so
Right. Okay, so it's 7 cents an hour. We say that there are 800 minutes for a slate. That's I mean, at that point, that's $56. No, never mind. I did math really bad. 800 divided by 60 times. Okay, never mind then. Yeah, the math I had said it would be like $56 a slate. I was like, all right, we can still do a ton, but like all of
yeah.
them, no. But like,
Uh-oh,
yeah.
you
So
dropped out.
I lost
okay,
you.
I was gonna say, yeah, if it's like $1 a slate, which
Yeah.
I feel like it is around, then just do as many as you possibly can.
Right. Yeah, we might as
Um,
well, and then
Yeah.
then we just like have as a ton of data. One thing I did want to I thought of before is like, should we consider doing like multiple builds per, like rather than just doing the one build per like set of settings per contest or per slate? Should we consider, given like that we have an element of randomness in the builds, right? Because we're random sampling from the sims. Should we consider doing like multiple sets of builds to just like decrease the noise that we're getting from like the sim? Like if you do a set of 500 lineups with sim variance 10, then that's only like 500 sims per game.
I almost feel like no, because we're not trying to test our sims exhaustively. We're trying to
Right.
test the settings that are actually going to like what's going to be produced. And I get that, like, yes, like one user creating it will get certain lineups and other users can get different ones. And so I guess from that perspective, it could be worth it to do multiple.
But I guess if we're doing like every slate
So
of the
many
season, then
different
that kind of
ones.
balances it out a
Yeah.
little bit.
That I guess, yeah, that was ultimately what I was thinking too, is like if we're doing all of the slates, that should.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like if we have to add granularity, well, like if you're running cache mode, don't do multiple. But if you're running at sim precision 10, then do 10.
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing 8, then like I just feel like that adds a lot of complexity where
Yeah.
it's probably not worth it. But if you can think of an easy way to do it, I'm not opposed. I just don't want it to add too much like overhead to it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think we should run all the like a bunch of slates. We'll just do one per, but I think we should just be mindful of like, especially with sim precision, if we're getting like, oh, on one of these big slates, like sim precision 10 is like the worst
Yeah.
setting, and then on another one it's like the best, you know, if like we're getting a really high variance in like just the kind of relative ROI of these setting combinations, and that would indicate to me that like, I mean, maybe it could just be like something about what the slates where it's like, oh, there's just like the ownership is way different, and or like the, you know, just the makeup of the slate is different. But like, I think, you know, having just that wild variance in the relative results would at least lead me to like want to test a bit more and like run more multiple builds and just see like, hey, if you run like 5 different builds with the same settings, like what's the variance in like the
How much
ROI?
time would it take for you to set up something where it's like, it is what I said, where it's, and tell me if this just like is not worth the time, but to me, it's just like dumb to run 5 optimizer builds. But if it takes
Right,
you
yeah.
a ton of time to set it up to like have some steps in the number of builds,
It wouldn't be that crazy.
okay,
I think
then yeah,
well,
like do like
yeah.
10 for. You could almost just make it where like this is not perfect, but just like how whatever sim precision the setting is, that's how many builds we do.
Yeah. I mean, that is gonna like
That's a lot.
multiply. Yeah, that's gonna kind of like increase how much
So like
processing we
create something
need.
smarter than what I
but-
said, but like in that
Right.
direction.
Yeah. I think that would be smart. We do have to think about how we aggregate the results at the end of it, because obviously, like then we'll just have like a bigger sample size for those, and like we can't just, yeah, we essentially will probably just like average out the results for like within, like with the same set, all the builds with the same settings, we'll sort of just like average the results there and use that, I would think. So it shouldn't be,
What do you mean?
it shouldn't be, well, if we have like, say we have 5 different builds with like the same settings, in order to like analyze like the relative ROI of those versus like one cache settings build, I think we just like take the average like of the metrics for those builds and just compare
Right,
it.
we're not looking at the cumulative profit or anything.
Right,
Yeah.
or like the best, because like you could, if you just
I
like
see.
sorted by like ROI, you might get like the best build of those 5, but on average they're middle of the road. So you just want to make sure that
So we need to make sure then that they're firewalled in the sense that like there shouldn't be any like you can't mix and match lineups from different builds, which I'm assuming is what you mean. Like, say you have 5 different builds for a 5-5-10 build. Each one of those should be like its own thing, and you get an average, 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 and then you would like average those together.
Right. So like in that analysis step, like, you know, say we have in the final results, we have the CSV file where we have like 1 row per build. We're going to have to convert that into another.
Yeah.
That's just like each row is like the unique settings rather than the unique build. And like, so we essentially just average, but that's easy to do after the fact. So like, as long as we're storing all these results, then we can just like, in the analysis step of this, kind of aggregate that accordingly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then honestly, I don't think it's worth digging into findings, because I think it's just noise compared to like what we will have.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's still work needs to be done to get this all ready. In your mind, Matt, what should Elijah be working on as he waits for this? Like, should he just wait, or are there other things he can do in the meantime?
Yeah, so I mean, we had talked earlier today, like there's kind of the completely separate project that I was going to have him, like a data collection project that I was going to have him start working on, just rather than kind of spinning his wheels on this stuff.
I think that's fine too. Yeah.
So that's what I was thinking. Outside of that, yeah, I mean, one thing that he could do is just look at, I mean, this is related, but could do some analysis just on like the contests themselves. But I guess this is similar to what Eric did, so probably wouldn't make sense. But I was just thinking, like, when you have, you know, if you have those 10 different contests, they're all sort of like identical, I would be curious like what the variance is and like the you know, the unique users entering those contests and like the Bink score
I think
and
we
stuff
still
like
just
that.
run into the
But
same issue there where like he can do that for a couple slates,
Yeah.
but won't be able to do the analysis. I guess you could just run. This is like
you
not
could,
a
because you don't need
contest
to
sim,
run
this is just more
sims.
like yeah.
Right. It would just be more out of curiosity. But I don't know if it would really lend that much.
I would just
like,
have him do the
insight.
data collection thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, I'm excited that I was worried we were going to get on this, and then it was going to be like weeks before the contest sim stuff would be
No.
like the scalable framework would be ready. And so this is awesome news. Anything else you guys want to go over?
No, I mean, I think, if we do this again, Tuesday next week, I think hopefully we'll have results. I think we'll probably be early on in like the analysis part of
Yeah.
that, given like the timeline of where things are. But I think we'll hopefully have some stuff to talk about with just like initial findings if everything goes well
For
with
sure.
this scalability, and then
I think
we
a
can kind of,
framework
like-
that's like ready to accept a huge file whenever it's kind of
Yeah.
here, which like, and me and Matt just before this went over kind of some of the visuals that I was making to guide that analysis. I think like,
Yeah.
it'll scale like very well whenever we have like a large amount of data, and it'll be less noise, as kind of you were saying, and
Yeah.
more like like honest findings. So yeah.
And I will say with I mean, not to look at it too much, but I think the important thing is like obviously getting all this data, all these sims done. And I think we don't want to do too much of like digging into like the bucketing. I think the bucketing stuff is interesting, but I think we want to get all the data and just like start really simple with the analysis of like just comparing like the average ROI and
For sure.
median ROI and stuff of like for all these settings, and then we can kind of start to plan out like the next steps and sort of in terms of like the rest of like the more complex analysis. But I do just want to make sure that like let's start simple once you do get to that point of having all that data.
For sure. I mean, yeah, it's already like pretty complicated because it's pretty high dimensional data. Even when like have all the data, there's like a lot of variables. So like, yeah, it's definitely, even to keep it just simple of looking at how do these types of contests perform when these are their settings is like pretty. It's like it's already in 4 dimensions. So definitely, I agree with keeping it simple moving forward.
And what I would say is definitely top priority is to get something workable for the scalable infrastructure this week. Assuming that's done, is to then make sure the sims are kicked off like as soon as we can. And I know that it won't take too long to get it done, but like I just want to make sure that come Monday, like there's data for Elijah to work with. And then I would almost view it as, I think this is in line with what you guys were just saying, but like don't necessarily try to think of every edge case and try to get the most thorough analysis, because we don't want the call on Tuesday to come around and then you're like, well, I'm like halfway done, or I'm like 3/4 of the way done. I don't have any findings yet. It's like there should be findings that you're confident in for next week, assuming the data's ready and all of that. So it's like time box it so that that's doable, and then we can say, okay, like let's find the other areas to dig into a little bit more. But it's like keep it basic to get something, and then from there we can add to it.
Yeah,
so cool.
I mean, I definitely have the framework now that like given X many contests, I can pretty much show you where the patterns are of the performance relative to the 3 build settings. So like that's like a fairly easy plug-in whenever the data's there. Cool. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting that done.
Awesome.
Sure.
Well, guys, I appreciate it, and we'll catch up soon.
All right, take care.
Thanks. Bye.